With Jujutsu Kaisen chapter 256, Itadori has finally begun starting to make a legitimate case to start beating the fraud allegations that many fans have leveled against him for the last couple of years, especially with everything that's happened. In particular, once Fushiguro got his body taken over by Sukuna, it's basically been the Sukuna stocks are on the rise and the Yuji Itadori stocks are crashing and burning. But if you bought the dip on those Itadori stocks, you're starting to get one heck of a return on your investment because Yuji has turned the table on Sukuna by whipping out Black Flash in a very nasty way in a combo assist that has Sukuna fans starting to get a little bit nervous because the main character looks like he's finally about to start coming out on top. However, let's back things up and let's get into the review itself because we got a lot to unpack because there's a lot that happened here. So we open up with a mini flashback of Gojo teaching about Black Flash. He gets asked like, hey man, why can't you intentionally just use Black Flash whenever you want to? And Gojo realized that he's getting asked this question literally because he's Gojo, not because being Gojo just means that he's awesome. I mean, it technically does mean he's awesome, but he's getting asked because he has the 6 eyes, and they seem to think that Gojo can just bust out Black Flash whenever he wants to, which leads to Gojo clarifying not just for the people asking him, but for us as the audience as well. Gojo says that when it comes to using Black Flash, there's no set activation for him to use it. When he's fighting and he's using curse energy to amp up his punches, he's going all out. He's not holding back. But even for someone like him, Gojo still needs to rely on luck to pull off a Black Flash, which is why someone like Nanami, the resident Mahuto victim, has the record for the most number of Black Flashes in a single day. However, Gojo literally being Gojo makes this whole thing irrelevant. The reason being is that Gojo is just so strong that his fights, they never really last long enough for him to get into a zone and start busting out Black Flash, which that makes us go back and appreciate the battle with Sukuna that much more. That's likely the very longest battle that Gojo has ever had in his life. The narrator adds on to this by saying that Gojo has been surpassed by Yuji Itadori, but before someone grabs some pitchforks and they start getting the guns and they start jumping the gun at this statement, it's not a correlation to Yuji's power per se. If Gojo is to be considered a 10, it's not the story saying that Yuji is suddenly an 11. It's specifically regarding the number of Black Flash hits, which goes back to what we're told. Gojo rarely gets to use Black Flash because he can't use it at will, and most of his fights, they're over before he even gets into a zone to even pull one off. It just speaks volumes to how incredibly broken Gojo was. We then transition over to Miguel beginning to get a little bit worried here because now that Sukuna has hit Black Flash, it might lead to Sukuna getting on a momentum swing, and that's the last thing you want with Sukuna because once this man starts cooking, the only thing left between you getting fried up, cooked, and served is how long Sukuna decides to leave the oven on while he's beating you and everyone else down. Yuji immediately begins to start putting the pieces together, openly wondering, is Sukuna about to get his reverse curse technique back the same way that Gojo did, and Choso's already one step ahead of Yuji, realizing that their window is closing, and if they're gonna do this, really take down Sukuna, Choso, Miguel, and Laru, they need to get on top of it right now, strike down Sukuna before his reverse curse technique comes back, and Yuji is lockstep right in with them. The coordination we see here is really beautifully done. Yuji is trying to trap Sukuna while Choso shoots off a supernova, but the problem, even with the best coordinated attacks, is that when you're dealing with Sukuna, at this point, this guy might as well be that guy that is using the controller to press up, up, right, down, that combination to activate a cheat code that you never knew existed, and suddenly he gets all kinds of power-ups, because that's basically been Sukuna's fights, and that's what happens here. Sukuna, despite all their best efforts, he evades their attack despite everything that they're trying to do. However, not want to be left out, Maki suddenly speed blitzes Sukuna, and she does her best to stab Sukuna with her sword, but Sukuna, being the Chad that he is, manages to grab hold of her blade. This leads to Sukuna hitting his rhythm once again and landing a third Black Flash on Maki, and that's not all. Maki realizes that Sukuna's normal slash output has been raised as well. When Sukuna tries to send another series of slashes at them, Choso impressively manages to block with Supernova, but this leads to another slate of slashes coming in, and Sukuna is one step ahead of Choso because before they even hit, Sukuna is already behind them, and it's then we see more signs that Sukuna has gotten his groove back. The slashes were both a bluff and a distraction to get Choso Choso off guard, and this leads to Sukuna slamming him into the wall and hitting him with a 4th Black Flash, beating Choso worse than The Rock beat down Cody Rhodes a couple weeks ago in the rain on Monday Night Raw. And you can see what Gege is doing here. He's creating a sense of helplessness because the one thing they're trying to avoid right now, Sukuna is getting into a rhythm. It's happened, and it's happening quickly. We're now up to 4 Black Flashes in a row, which that ties the record for Nanami in a single fight, which now that you have a bit of a context as a reminder, you can start appreciating what it is that Sukuna's doing right now, why it's so special, because this is starting to get crazy. He's looking unstoppable. He looks every bit like the final boss. We're seeing something truly special here with Sukuna. This leads to Choso somehow managing to cut down on the damage done to him by making an armor of blood and holding on to Sukuna's arm. Now, this might have been instinctual, this might have even been luck, but I'd argue this was the one thing that actually kept Sukuna from killing Choso, and this gives Itadori enough time to swoop in and rail Sukuna with hard-hitting punch to the face. Choso then tells us that it doesn't matter how many times Sukuna hits Black Flash right now. The important thing is that Itadori stays their ace in the hole, because each time Itadori rocks Sukuna with a hit, Sukuna's curse energy output and control over Fushiguro, it weakens. And you have to realize that if Choso is realizing this too, you better believe that Sukuna, even as he's riding this combat high, he realizes the danger that Yuji presents. Miguel, seeing the situation, suggests that they cut bait and run, which, given how Sukuna is making this whole thing look like a horror movie, I don't blame him at all. To paraphrase what's happening here, Miguel pretty much is going, this looks like a director's cut of Sukuna's horror movie, and Miguel's basically saying, dude, I've seen enough horror movies to know that the black guy usually gets killed when things get to this point. So Miguel's like, hey, Laru, we've done our job, let's get out of here. But Laru's not having any of it. Laru says that he has unfinished business. While Yuji versus Sukuna is raging on, we get a few twists thrown our way, like when Yuji busts out piercing blood on Sukuna, and that's where we learn some more information, critical information. Choso reveals that Itadori can't use Convergent, so he gave Yuji something which Yuji can use to fire off piercing blood, but Sukuna manages to push him away. But that's where things take a turn. Yuji is now in a zone, and this is where the narrator steps in for us. The narrator says that Mahito once sensed that Yuji was about to use Black Flash, and in this very moment, Sukuna realized that Itadori was about to use Black Flash too. But this is where we get our plot twist. Sukuna's consciousness is forcibly diverted elsewhere, and it's because of Laru. So Laru's curse technique allows him to not just grab hold of the physical body, but grab hold of their consciousness as well, which is just enough to allow Yuji's Black Flash to connect. And this is a huge one, where the freaking narrator tells us that Yuji has now unlocked his potential through Black Flash, and that Yuji has awakened. And the editor for the series itself even weighs in, saying that the light of hope shines black. And this is clearly a moment where you realize between Yuji now being in a groove and his power being able to lower Sukuna's curse energy output and simultaneously start jarring free Fushiguro from Sukuna's control, this might very well be the turning point, because Yuji is in that groove. And if he manages to hit 4 Black Flashes on Sukuna the way that Nanami hit 4 Black Flashes during the events of Jujutsu Kaisen Volume 0, Sukuna, he might be done with this fight. He might not win. This might be what it takes to break Fushiguro from Sukuna's control. Now, I won't lie, this could be written off as the main character gets a power up against the final boss, and if you say that, I'm not going to argue with you, but I do think that you can't write that off just like this just yet. Itadori, there's payoff for it. He's had the potential. He's shown it at times in the series that he's catching on quickly. It's important to remember, like, Itadori has not been a Jujutsu sorcerer for a long time. Sukuna is the one who's taken Itadori lightly, and it's only right that Sukuna ends up getting his just due by getting bullied by Yuji after everything that has happened. This is a long time going. This narrative is well overdue, because Sukuna has had a lot of momentum on his side. Something Gojo fans will never fail to concede on that, because they're still holding on to cope that Gojo somehow made a binding vow and is coming back. When the villain is this cocky, they're either going to win, which Gege might have the balls to do that, or it's going to be the last person they expect that ends up getting the W. And right now, it's clear that Yuji is stepping into his own right now at the moment where all hope seems lost. It does make you wonder, can Itadori pull off the win and release Fushiguro, or if he even has still domain expansion, could that do it? Which this video on the screen explains every domain expansion in the series up until Okotsu used it in the manga.